An interesting stat that I read. Mm-hmm. So they did
100% of women are sick.
Yeah.
Did you read that stat too?
Mm-hmm. They did a test, or sort of like a study in the UK, and they said, because this kind of goes to a lot of things are, women problems that get wrapped up in everything else. But they said, should we prioritize free speech or protecting people from harmful or offensive speech? And they did all the different categories to show obviously young people said more, young people were more on the
less free speech,
and old people were more. But the biggest interesting one was men is 47%. And then the numbers don't add up because some people said either like don't comment or not sure or whatever.
Yeah.
But of the yeses and nos, men, 47% said free speech is more important. 36% said protecting people from harmful speech is more important. Women was 30% said free speech, and 51% said harmful or offensive speech.
Interesting. That would actually kind of logically make sense to me though, because I think women are like, in terms of the, I guess, stereotypes of like the nurturing kind of like carers or whatever, like I guess they're more empathetic. So they're thinking more about others. And then I guess in that sense versus like these kind of higher order, like ideas.
I think so. Yeah.
I think so.
Well,
how do you think Steve Harvey feels about it?
Steve Harvey's out there.
Do you see his thing where he like, there's the big thing yesterday where Steve Harvey's like, I can't do stand up anymore or whatever. Cause he's like, whatever stand up special is going to be my last stand up special ever. Like, cause I'm going to lose all my jobs or whatever.
He would lose his job.
And because he's like, cancel culture is like ruining.
Although he's not that wild. Like Steve Harvey's
his whole thing is like being gay is against God and you should marry a woman and have 10. He's basically Ben Shapiro. He's like a conservative fucking religious guy.
That's correct. Yeah.
But the funny thing is he's like, cancel culture is ruining comedy, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, Disney writes your checks.
Yeah.
And you can't say what you want when Disney writes your checks.
You can't say what you want.
But like, don't say like, oh, it's cancel culture is ruining comedy. You're like, look, you decided to fucking be beholden to Disney. So you can't say whatever you want.
Well, cancel culture is definitely ruining like the industry.
Oh, for sure.
The comedy industry. Someone I talked to that was like a big job.
But is it ruining it or is it just reordering it?
It's ruining it. I think all those companies are doing worse. I think all their numbers are down. I think that they're making worse stuff. It depends on what.
Well, the Barry Weiss thing, we talked about it like just before this, like quickly, but there is like, the numbers must be down, but then you're like, you see the ratings and they're like, unless they're lying. Like,
what? No. There depends on the thing you're talking about. Mm-hmm. A lot of shows, their numbers are down. They haven't made like hit comedies in years, especially not the numbers. And one of the things that I was talking to someone who was like a big guy that started like, one of the biggest studios in America and stuff like that, right? And doesn't work there anymore. He was saying the behind closed doors, basically everyone was like in agreement, and it wasn't even, something they're afraid to talk about, was we're not going to make stuff for the demographic of 18 to 35-year-old males. Like that was basically, which is essentially comedy and action. You know what I mean? So those were kind of, not to say that they didn't make any action movies, but even when they do make action movies, they get Jason Momoa and it's sort of pandering to girls, like even
yeah.
So again, they still make a lot of the big franchise ones, but the new stuff, like, so they kind of decided that our demographic isn't going to be 18 to 35 males. So that sector of the population all went to watching YouTube, podcast, whatever else, other things that maybe they just had other hobbies and don't pay as much attention to watching stuff at all. But to say that it's not like ruining the industry, like, depends on what you look at. If you go, what singular shows are doing the numbers as before? Less, and there is more decentralization.
Like I saw that.
What's a great comedy that the industry's like produced in the last while?
There's this show that,
like a movie or a television show.
Movie, I don't have no idea. Like
in the last 5 years,
there was always like a culturally like.
There's a few
hyper relevant movie all the time, comedy. Like, there was always like an Anchorman or something where you're like, you couldn't walk
the closest
around
you get is like the Kevin Hart ones,
talking about it.
Yeah, you don't really have that the same degree.
No,
anymore.
you don't have it at all. Like they just make these like kind of big budget, like family friendly, like, I don't know, schlocky, whatever. There's shows that are big, but I'm like, I don't know anybody who watches them, but they say like Ghosts or whatever.
Right.
They go, this is the biggest fucking show on TV.
And now
I don't know what that means because I don't know anybody who watches it.
Right, Ted Lasso or whatever. But Ted Lasso's a bit in the girls category where it's like they pump it up, but like the actual numbers aren't like the crazy.
Yeah, it's
they
like,
aren't the way that they're.
It's like how they
saying
did it
is.
with the CBC in Canada, where they like
Yeah.
have a show and they go, "This is the biggest show," and you go, "I've never met someone who watched it." You search,
Yeah, yeah.
you search it on Twitter, not one person's talking about it.
No, they
is
like
it that big.
Ted Lasso's like big the way that something's big on Twitter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's very beloved for people who like to comment on these things because it like reflects their values that they want people, the world to have that they have.
Yeah.